From the implications of immortality-granting whale goop to Free Willy tributes, Avatar: The Way of Water has an ocean of small details you might have missed. Most of James Cameron's previous films have an anti-capitalist or at least anti-corporate stance within the film's narrative. In the previous Avatar film, this was shown through the banal, but nonetheless coldly malicious, machinations of the Resources Development Administration, or RDA, as they try to kill off all the Na'vi hostiles and hollow out the natural resources of Pandora by enlisting a paramilitary unit led by Stephen Lang's Colonel Miles Quaritch. In Avatar: The Way of Water, Colonel Quaritch returns as the sequel film's main antagonist once again. The film explains away Quaritch's resurrection by stating that RDA had stored his memories onto a disc prior to the first film's mission, in case he were to die. And since he did die at the end of the first film, his memories were put into a Na'vi's avatar to return to Pandora and finish the mission he started years earlier.
Well, they could fix me up if I rotated back and make me pretty again.
This brings up another example of the evils of untethered capitalism and corporate power in this dystopian future. You still have to work for the company even after you die. In Avatar: The Way of Water, Quaritch, now a Na'vi, doesn't seem too disturbed by this revelation himself. However, the existential dread of how bad the labor conditions on Earth have to be to allow infinite forced employment is pretty horrifying. At one point, the newly resurrected Na'vi clone version of Colonel Quaritch returns to the place where Jake Sully and Neytiri had killed him in his original human form at the end of the first Avatar film. Since many years have passed since his death, Quaritch's human body has now decomposed into a rotting skeleton. Na'vi Quaritch then picks up his dead human skull, in an obvious reference to the "Alas, poor Yorick" monologue from Hamlet. This isn't just a simple visual illusion either. The speech is about the existential dread of one's inevitable death, as well as the futility of life itself. Hamlet had fond memories of Yorick, and as he holds Yorick's skull in his hand, he laments what he sees as a waste of life. So too does Quaritch as he holds his own human head in his now Na'vi hands. He is literally seeing the futility of his past life, as well as the inevitability of his own death since it already happened. He attempts to come to terms with it, but then decides to crush the skull in an act of defiance to the blatant symbolism of fate and the natural order of the life-death cycle. In the first Avatar, actor Giovanni Ribisi played the corporate villain Parker Selfridge, who was the head of the Earth-based RDA that was seeking Pandora's sacred unobtainium. He was essentially the main antagonist of that film alongside Stephen Lang's aforementioned Colonel Quaritch, and in many ways was worse than the Colonel. Selfridge himself represented the banal evils of bureaucratic corporate greed.
Look, you're supposed to be winning the hearts and the minds of the natives. Isn't that the whole point of your little puppet show?
Ribisi Selfridge is not a major character in the sequel, but he does have a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo in it nonetheless. His appearance occurs towards the beginning of the film, while Colonel Quaritch's recently awakened Na'vi clone watches a recording from his human self in the past. In the recording, Selfridge is seen in the background, correcting Quaritch and detailing the technology behind the memory transfer process. When James Cameron's original 2009 Avatar film was first released in theaters, one of the chief complaints was that it was basically Dances with Wolves, but with blue space aliens instead of Native Americans. Both films are about a soldier from a colonizing force going native by falling in love with the indigenous people and deciding to fight his own kind to protect them. Furthermore, both films talk about how most native cultures would use the entire animal after a hunt, utilizing the animal's meat to eat, their hide to make clothes, their bones to make tools, etc. Avatar: The Way of Water, unsurprisingly, has many breathtaking sequences in it. One of the most harrowing sequences in the film is a chase scene on the Pandoran Ocean between a massive RDA hunting vessel and a herd of sentient alien whale-like creatures called Tulkun. It's an obvious allusion to the inhuman and cruel whaling practices as we see the RDA hunting crew using their advanced sci-fi technology to violently corner, trap, and kill an entire family of Tulkun. It's also reminiscent of the way European colonizers in the West would hunt animals, like the buffalo, to near extinction for their hides, while letting the corpses rot with no care for the wider ecosystem. Furthermore, while the giant Tulkun are hunted mercilessly, it's only so that the company can extract just one single vial of brain goop, leaving the rest of the Tulkun carcasses to rot. What's interesting about Avatar: The Way of Water is that, besides some offhand mentions, the plot of the film is no longer predicated on extracting unobtainium from Pandora anymore. Instead, the RDA is attempting to completely terraform Pandora for human occupation, as in the ensuing years since the first Avatar film, it seems Earth has become completely uninhabitable. We don't spend a lot of time on Earth, but it seems one of the main issues with the planet in the Avatar universe is that it's overcrowded. See, during the previously mentioned Tulkun hunting scene, we discovered the Tulkun brain goop is used to completely stop aging in humans. This means that there is a population of people on Earth who are essentially immortal, assuming they can afford the goop. Adding to the fact that workers can seemingly have their memories scanned to constantly be recloned as an infinite labor force, it seems the company's short-sighted, profit-motivated, and anti-labor policies are dooming Earth. This also goes against the balancing of energy that Na'vi follow on Pandora. They say the goddess Ewa gives energy for life, but that it is only borrowed and that you end up giving the energy back in death. However, humans on Earth, presumably rich humans, are trying to hoard their life and their energy and not giving it back to nature, causing disruption, chaos, and destruction on their planet in the process. It's no secret that Avatar: The Way of Water director and co-writer James Cameron is obsessed with the ocean. He's spent tons of money from his own personal fortune to fund deep-sea expeditions. So it's no surprise that some of that design aesthetic for the RDA's Tulkun hunting operations would have some aesthetic similarities to real ships and subs. Even the more fantastical sci-fi designs, such as the subs that have metallic crab-like legs and mechanical claws, bear resemblances to real tech in the field of deep-sea diving. James Cameron's love for the ocean clearly extends to the various aquatic life that inhabits it. This includes the whale-like Tulkun, who live in the ocean and visit the coastal villages of the marine-based Metkayina Na'vi tribe. The Metkayina and the Tulkun share a close sacred bond, as the Tulkun are revealed to be sentient creatures arguably smarter than both the humans and Na'vi, who are even capable of complex language, mathematics, and even art. At one point, Jake's younger son, Loak, befriends a wounded and banished Tulkun. Throughout the rest of the film, Loak and the banished Tulkun swim together and grow a close and special bond themselves. The Tulkun even becomes pivotal to the Na'vi winning the final battle against the large Tulkun hunting ship. This subplot seems to be similar to the plot of the 1993 family film Free Willy, about a young boy who befriends a mistreated orca and then is able to free it from captivity. Not only that, but there are seemingly overt visual references to the film, such as the slow-motion shot of it climactically jumping in the air set right before Pandora's daily eclipse that is very close to the visuals of Free Willy's cinematography. The climax of Avatar: The Way of Water is set during a battle on top of the ocean where the entire Sully family fights off Quaritch and his recently Naviified marine goons on the massive deep-sea Tulkun hunting vessel. Eventually, the raging battle creates enough structural damage to the ship to cause it to flip upside down throughout the rest of the scene. This, of course, lets the ocean water flood the ship as it rapidly capsizes and sinks, with the family stuck inside. During this exciting sequence, there are many shots and situations that are very similar to James Cameron's previous action-packed epic set in the ocean, Titanic. Speaking of James Cameron's 97 historical blockbuster epic Titanic, another returning element from that film is the director casting star Kate Winslet as the Metkayina queen Ronal in Avatar: The Way of Water. Cameron often likes to bring actors he's worked with before on different projects, such as Bill Paxton appearing in Terminator, Aliens, True Lies, and Titanic, as well as working on multiple films with star Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sigourney Weaver.
I'll be back.
However, there had been some tension between director James Cameron and Winslet from their turbulent time working together on the stressful and disaster-prone Titanic set. Luckily, they've since been able to bury the hatchet and finally work together again. Meanwhile, Ronal is a strong and powerful character, and she is the Metkayina who is the most wary of helping and giving sanctuary to Jake Sully and his family. James Cameron's Avatar series has often been called a sci-fi version of revisionist westerns like Dances with Wolves and At Play in the Fields of the Lord. All these films have a sympathetic view of Native Americans and their struggles against violent and genocidal colonization from European settlers, but they also usually show things from a white person's outside perspective. Even worse, they often fall into problematic white savior and noble savage narrative tropes, with Avatar unfortunately being no exception. While Avatar: The Way of Water doesn't necessarily alleviate that problem all the way, the fact that Jake Sully has been fully integrated for years helps the narrative stay focused solely on the Na'vi's own perspective at the very least. This includes more backstory on the intricacies of the politics between the various native tribes of Pandora. For instance, there's initially immense tension between Jake's family, who hail from the forest Immortality clan, when they first meet with the aquatic Metkayina tribe. It's true Avatar isn't entirely one-to-one with real-life history, but this animosity between the different Na'vi clans is reminiscent of how many Native American tribes were warring with each other and had trouble working together due to past tensions during the European invasion. The tension between the Immortality and the Metkayina seen in Avatar: The Way of Water is unfortunately also due to the fact that, like humans, the Na'vi can be biased against those with physical differences. In The Way of Water, the Metkayina Na'vi have evolved, seemingly for thousands, if not millions of years to survive near the oceans of Pandora, which means that their bodies have adapted specifically for that environment. This includes thicker, turtle-like forearms, longer and thicker tails, and stronger diaphragms to swim better. Meanwhile, the forest-based Sully family are more lithe and thin to make climbing and running through trees easier. Beyond those relatively obvious physical differences between the forest and water Na'vi, another difference that exists, but is not really commented on, is the difference in skin color between two tribes, most likely due to the different environments. The Metkayina's skin are essentially light green, while the Sullys are a much darker shade of blue. This adds an extra layer of racism and classism to the movie's events. It also creates complications in mounting a revolution, since past bigotries can make it hard to bring disparate communities to fight together against their common oppressors, even when it's necessary. But as the film shows at the end, when King Tonowari says that Jake and his family are now Metkayina after they fight together, banding together and looking past bigotry is possible.